technologies for data capture, data analytics, and database management, food manufacturers can now unlock new streams of value from the information they generate in silos across the food chain. Information sharing of this sort can be quite expensive and contentious in some cases. So in addition to exploring how we can use new technologies to help us harness value from the information generated across food chains, it's also important for us to keep up to date with promising innovations in ways in which data management and sharing mechanisms can be used to help us overcome some of the challenges and shortcomings of information sharing in data silos, as well as data security and governance issues. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raymond, and I'm a researcher and lecturer in project operations and supply chain management at the University of Manchester. I'm also the policy liaison for the STFC Food Network Plus. My talk this afternoon pertains to a question that is central to smart manufacturing, which is how do food factories, producers and processors, optimize value from the information that they produce within their food chain? This would include safety information, quality, nutrition, and sustainability information. The webinar will be loosely based on a project that was commissioned by the STFC and the FSA to review ante-mortem and post-mortem inspection processes across UK abattoirs and some abattoirs abroad to explore means or opportunities for applying 21st century technologies to digitize the manual inspection processes in meat production. So I'll begin with a brief scope of our exploration into value creation from food chain information generated in meat processing plants, all the way from the farms, all down to the retail end. And then I'll reflect on some best practice data sharing initiatives that can enable smart factories, particularly based on the role of data trusts as an emerging means to getting across the hurdles of digital readiness across the chain, data governance, interoperability, and traceability. So I was part of this independent review commissioned by the FSA and STFC to explore how advanced technologies can be used to augment manual inspection processes for meat inspections in UK abattoirs. The review entailed an extensive site visit stage where we went to abattoirs of different sizes, processing capacities, dealing with different species across the UK and Europe. As with other food processing sectors, we observed that food safety is the crucial measure of value. And of course, it's one of the most capital-intensive operations of the FSA. Somewhere around 2/3 of FSA capacity in terms of inspectors are used for meat safety inspection. And indeed, most of the regulation around traceability for food safety is built robustly around traceability in the meat sector. So this sector actually gave us an overview of what traceability using data and how you manage food information in food systems as a whole looks. We found, however, that the willingness to collect data and to share data by the actors, farmers, processors, and retailers depended on how the different actors viewed value as emerging from the data that they were sharing. Inspection generally entailed a rigorous protocol of checks and balances across the chain, using trained veterinary inspectors to monitor critical control points as the livestock moves from the farms, that's ante-mortem inspection, through the processing and packaging operations in the meat plants. The FSA requires processors and farmers to have relevant information streamed from the farms into the processing site before these inspections can take place. These food chain information entails things like provenance, health and safety records, movement licenses, and they will normally accompany the livestock as they move into the abattoirs. But we discovered in our exploration that for farmers, safety value had more to do with generating information around breeding, feeding, welfare, those sorts of information that help them improve their results. So aligning their processes, the processes of producing the animal to what the requirements of the market are. For the abattoirs, on the other hand, safety value was mostly about provenance because they had to be accountable to the FSA by regulation. So they get as much information as they can from the farms and then try to use that information to help them with their ante-mortem and post-mortem inspection, including improving the communication of inspection results to farmers to make changes in their production processes that reflect the inspection results. So for them, the use of advanced technologies for channeling that data from the farms, the use of advanced technologies to smoothen the manual processes for inspections in the plants, as well as technologies that help them pull information from the retail end to inform them about the key metrics that customers want to see on their products when they purchase meat. For retailers, on the other hand, value is more about aligning their reporting around safety to what consumers want. So as you can see, with creating value, each actor has a different approach. For some, it's about the result, as in the FSA, but for them as well, it's about the process, streamlining the processes using available information either from upstream or downstream to ensure that they're able to reduce the cost of inspection and the effort that they have to put into inspection processes. So what this tells us is that generating value, even from food chain information, can come from any relevant stream across the food chain. So whether you're looking at safety, quality, sustainability, nutritional value, information that is necessary for generating such value is available in all these different streams. And so a systems approach is required for us to be able to view the full picture of how food chain information generated upstream can be translated into valuable information that helps streamline inspections in the midstream, as well as information that helps inform consumer behavior downstream. The challenge we observed is that in each node in the food chain, the relevant data that is required for promoting food safety exists at different stages of sophistication. For instance, despite the use of air tags to convey relevant regulatory information about cattle movement and animal licenses, for example, from the farms, crucial data that already exists on the farms around animal feeding, welfare, and even some other health measures associated to breeding and the like, which can be captured on these air tags, are not currently captured on the air tag. So the air tags only convey information about provenance, information about scanty information about the safety of the animal and the location of the animal. And so there's enormous scope to capture a lot more information using the air tags that are available. But then if you move midstream, you find a higher level of sophistication where other technologies are now being applied. There's some degree of robotics in certain abattoirs, as we observe across the UK, and even to more advanced stages in countries across Europe and the rest of the world. So in other words, just to capture value from safety information, there would need to be certain types of technologies applied to digitize the data upstream, other types of technologies applied midstream to utilize the data in better ways or to capture data that is currently generated manually in a digital format, and as well other technologies, particularly machine learning algorithms, to use this data to make predictive analysis about meat safety and consumer behavior further downstream. So for actors to be able to align their vision of what to capture around value safety, we found that value must be defined in broader performance terms. For instance, how do you apply technologies to farms, abattoirs, and the retail end concurrently so that you can use these technologies to generate traceability value that allows us to track single animals from the point where they are produced, for example, using genetics-based tracking, all the way to where they are processed, where we can check details that are linked to the genetics of the animal and the feeding of the animal to inform inspection processes at that stage, and reduce the manual input of FSA's resources that are currently stretched thin with the extra inspection requirements that they have owing to Brexit. So in other words, defining value around key performance measures, whether it's aligning value, defining value in terms of measuring the performance itself or advancing a particular performance measure, this has to be agreed amongst the key actors and around a particular value stream. Another point worth noting is that valuable data can find applications in multiple ways, depending on the technical capabilities of the players and whether they view that information as helping them create efficiencies in their current processes or helping them create additional value that they don't currently capture. For example, like I mentioned, the food chain information only captures provenance information, health and safety information, as well as animal movement information. But by capturing other streams of data that currently exist, predictive analytics can be used to improve the inspection processes so that would reduce the need for having several inspectors at abattoirs, as well as help to predict certain requirements from the consumer end in terms of what they would want traced about their meat produce. So in essence, for the same measure of value, for example, safety, we found that value can be derived concurrently across the chain by digitizing analogous processes or data that is captured manually, digitalizing existing data, for example, the data that is currently captured by the abattoirs that can be digitalized and used to make predictive analysis about the performance of farms that they can then use to inform them for performance improvements. And then finally, at a more advanced stage, completely revolutionizing the entire chain through digital transformation, making data work from farm all the way to retail by creating a mechanism that allows the key actors share relevant data around food safety. So this then pushed us to start to explore, having explored the abattoirs, to start to explore what would a 21st century abattoir look like? And how can we bring relevant food chain information that is currently captured up to speed by capturing more robust sets of information from farm to abattoir to the retail end, and then create what would be the 21st century abattoir. Now, the principles I'll be explaining here apply to the meat industry, but they can also apply to other food factories that are looking to capitalize on the information generated across the food chain to create value for all the actors. So with the advances in technologies like smartphones, the internet, and the digital technology movement that we see with Industry 4.0, there's now a paradigm shift as to how we need to manage data across supply chains to be able to generate the sort of value that is meaningful to all players. When it comes to food safety and things like food welfare and sustainability, we find that different actors have different reasons and different constraints around sharing the relevant data. And with incidences that we've seen, especially of recent around food welfare in the meat sector, it is obvious that there is a need for a robust data sharing mechanism that allows us to shift from this current paradigm where data is warehoused by the different actors, farmers, processors, and retailers in silos, to a dispensation where data can be used holistically. At the heart of this paradigm shift is the emerging notion of what is called data trust. And this opens up ample research areas for food researchers looking at different aspects of creating value for food supply chains holistically. Now, data trusts are legal structures that are established by food chain actors who act as data trusters, and they define the role that each actor will play in the data ecosystem, the standards and the technologies that they will deploy, and the policies for assessing and utilizing such data, as well as the governance and data management models that will be used, such as data commons or data cooperatives, depending on the kind of supply chain, so that they're able to generate value holistically for all the players in the chain. This is crucial because most food measures, like I mentioned, safety and provenance, food fraud, require collaborative efforts by all the key players. And as such, a data trust model that accounts for the actor's power and the actor's configuration in the chain must be developed so that the right data targeting safety, provenance, food fraud, and other measures can be designed and streamlined by this data trust initiative. The idea of data trust actually came into being in 2018 when the UK Government Office for Artificial Intelligence and Innovate UK ran 3 data trust pilots in different sectors to establish the working principles for deploying data trust as a strategy for sharing relevant data in food business and other business ecosystems. The pilot that's relevant for the food space centered around capturing value by minimizing food waste. And they pulled together different actors across the food system to find out how to create a trust that pulls relevant data from these different streams, brings them together in a shared collaborative platform, and then applies advanced technologies to use this data to generate value for all the actors. According to the Open Data Institute, such trusts have to be aligned around a particular challenge that the actors have co-designed. in order to understand the technologies that they need to apply, i.e. whether they need to digitize some data or some analogous processes, whether they need to digitalize some existing data, and whether there is scope for digital transformation in parts of the supply chain. Of course, all this will be designed around ideas about who the data holders will be, who the users of the data, and who the beneficiaries will be. But once a trust is co-designed around a specific issue, for example, safety, it can be launched and operated based on an agreed data access framework or model and a funding model as well. And after it is deployed, it can be assessed over time to examine the risks around how data is shared, the quality of data captured, the security, verification claims, and other interoperability challenges that might arise. One of the groundbreaking studies in this area was done by the Queen's University, and they were looking at legal frameworks that can be used to establish such data trust. And this is an area as well that researchers in food space can start looking into when you're looking to explore any of the broad traceability or value-adding streams in food chains. They designed, alongside a multinational firm called Pinsett Masons, 5 legal models for establishing data trust for smart value creation in food chains. And they argue that due to challenges in managing some of the data streams that you might be dealing with within such trust, especially data around GDPR, for example, in the case of the abattoir, there's certain data around the location of the farms and specific data about the farm holders that might be subject to GDPR rules. So even though you're looking at a broad scope such as safety, you would still have certain GDPR data that need to be managed. And so selecting the right legal framework is a crucial first step for fulfilling the objective of any such data trust. And then regardless of the kind of legal model chosen, there's also a room to explore the different types of governance frameworks that can be used to establish the kind of data sharing agreements between farmers upstream, processors midstream, and the retailers downstream. Now, as we're all aware, the power dynamics in different food chains are different. For example, with the meat supply chain, although we have large farmers, in the UK, the system is designed mostly around retailers. So the farmers are price takers. And in such system, the retailers would be the major data gatekeepers. In some other food systems, you have the farmers or the processors being data gatekeepers. So it's important to design a governance structure that is suitable for the specific food industry. In this regard, the FSA has recently released a data trust framework that food researchers are urged to start paying attention to, so that when you're designing any kind of research that is looking to explore any key value-adding stream for a food system holistically, you can try to tailor that around a data trust model that would work for the key players within that industry to produce the right data streams that can be aligned so that value can be generated. Another crucial role of data trusts, particularly when we're thinking about a smart manufacturing environment for the 21st century, is that it allows stakeholders to thoroughly assess the kind of data interoperability challenges and the maturity level of the different actors in their food chain with regards to the granular data that they generate towards food safety, provenance, food fraud prevention, and so on. As shown in the model on the slide here, you can measure things like the semantic, the technical, the business, the security, the legal interoperability readiness of the different actors, or at least assess them, before venturing into developing a data trust model to capture relevant data to create value around a specific data goal. The other thing to pay attention to is the fact that different players in the chain are at different levels of digital readiness. So part of what such a data trust would assess, or rather pay attention to, is the digital readiness of the key players in the food chain. As safety is a crucial concern for all food chains, and we all know that information is the new currency for driving value in food chains, it's important to start exploring research spaces that examine the digital readiness of key actors right from the farm gate level to the retail level, and even to consumer research level, that warehouse the valuable data that give us some kind of indication through predictive analysis using AI and machine learning algorithms into how food safety can be better optimized in a smart factory type environment. Once data interoperability gaps are identified and addressed, these sorts of food trusts can start to explore ways of facilitating traceability in a holistic manner. In other words, defining data access procedures across the different value and streams of the supply chain, deciding the procedures and technologies that will be deployed in the chain to collect the right data streams across the chain to target a particular value, and that sort of thing. So I'll give you a typical example here. In Denmark, we found such a data trust system being used and operational in the meat industry, where the government sits as the manager of the data trust and warehouses traceability information from the farm level down to genetic tracking of single animals, all loaded on the same system through the processing information, that is information generated from the inspection of the animal, all linked down to a specific barcode on the animal split in packaging ready for sale. Within such a system, the consumer can gain access and the animal can be traced back to the specific animal rather than the current system as used in the UK, where if there's a traceability challenge, we can only trace to batch level. And in some cases, batches of animals have to be wasted because there's the inability to trace all the way down to specific animals. But also with this kind of trust system in Denmark, they're able to provide consumers with this information. And so it creates additional room for research into how such information can be used to inform food labeling policies that capture safety from a dynamic point of view, showing the consumers what's happening to the food product as it progresses from farm up to the point to where it's consumed. There are several advanced technologies for communicating traceability, which is another area that we found to be quite interesting for exploring future research in this space. In thinking about ways in which we can make food chain information valuable across a chain, starting from a farm gate level all the way through processing to the retail and the consumer, we must be thinking about ways of communicating traceability value. Now, so we're aware there are several complex technologies that can be used to communicate traceability value, but companies exist at different levels of automation. So in deciding how to communicate traceability value, it's essential to assess what level and select the right type of technologies to combine, because at the end of the day, value creation is not so much about how high tech the technology is, but more about whether it is fit for purpose for a particular supply chain. Now, in terms of the different areas, obviously, food safety is the core area that most processors would like to trace or would like to create food trusts around so that they can generate robust data sets from farm gate all the way to consumption. But even in looking at safety, we find that safety has different data streams. Currently, in the inspection protocols used by the FSA for meat, most of these traceability data around food safety is gathered using paper or paper documents. And we're currently looking at research opportunities to explore how some of that data can be digitized so that the monitoring of food safety and traceability can be done in a more streamlined way for a digital-driven food supply chain. There are other measures as well. The scope of our project was looking at safety because that was the remit of the FSA, seen as that's the aspect that takes up most of their resources. But the network is a multidisciplinary network, and we can design other kinds of research that focuses on other core measures, for instance, food fraud. This is a crucial measure where stakeholders can converge and form data trusts. And this will require developing scientific research from how the right type of data that should be captured at the farm level, linking that to processing data that should be captured to inform any one of these aspects of fraud, and then all the way up to consumer data and how that should be communicated to the consumers to create value. In some industries, food defense is a very risky thing because of the tendency for intentional adulteration and the tendency for intentional fraud. While there were incidences, and we saw a few cases of this in the meat industry, it is not quite as pronounced, but certain industries have this as a huge challenge. And so data trust can play a huge role in developing the right standards and the right data ecosystem for the relevant actors to contribute relevant data streams from the farm all the way to the consumption level that would inform tracing and tracking of food fraud. Such data trust would undoubtedly entail public and private data partnerships and advanced technologies for data security. Quality is perhaps one of the most important traceability value streams around which data trust can be designed. And like I said, when thinking about data trust, you need to think about it from a more interdisciplinary and holistic point of view, in the sense that some of the data needs to be captured scientifically, some would be captured using technologies, some already exist and need to be analyzed using advanced machine learning and other types of algorithms, and some need to be understood from the consumer's perspective. When it comes to tracing quality, there's quite a vast research landmine in this area. And particularly because the FSA has now indicated interest in developing a data trust framework, designing research around tracing quality measures, particularly around nutrition and around other subtle quality measures like taste, sensory, and so on, would be quite worthwhile, because once we have established data trust systems, we're now starting to look forward to a 21st century food system where public and private data can interact almost seamlessly and can be governed holistically by the actors who are deriving value from the data at the same time. As we're all aware, sustainability is now also a crucial measure of value. And with the UK now being at the forefront of the sustainability agenda, particularly around food, there's ample scope for thinking about data trust mechanisms that capture food chain information around any sustainability value from the farm gate through the processing stages to the consumers. And I think the key takeaway from our exploration of the food industry, and the meat industry rather, is that if that connection is not made and the focus is on any one of the streams, there's a tendency that you would miss out on the value propositions of other actors, and your entire value equation might be flawed. For instance, in the current regime of the FSA, there really isn't a traceability measure around things like sustainability, or a traceability measure mandated by law around things like animal welfare. But the technologies that are currently in place to convey data around provenance and other things that the FSA find useful for tracing safety can still be used to convey relevant data that exists around all these other measures that can improve both the inspection value for safety as well as contribute to sustainability value as well. So in like manner, for researchers looking to explore sustainability in other food areas, there's ample opportunity to look at how such data trust can be established across the food chain to generate value in that manner. So while these different value streams can be traced using advanced technologies, like I mentioned, distributed ledgers, blockchains, and so on, it's important to note that standards like the GS1 standard and other cloud-based data storage applications can be used to expedite the process of finding out what data is currently existing that can be interoperable and what data needs to be captured pertaining to a particular measure of value that you're looking to explore. So it means that you don't always need to apply advanced technologies, because in the current state, particularly in the processing stream of most food chains, there's already ample data that can be used in very innovative ways and joined to new data capture that is scalable, for example, using Internet of Things applications at the upstream and linking up to existing data to generate results that are advantageous for all the players without necessarily investing heavily in new technologies. So in other words, the choice of technologies is crucial for developing any viable data trust in exploring future research opportunities around smart food factories. In this regard, a follow-on project that we are looking at is looking at how you can use what's it called now, a digital twin to replicate the entire inspection process for the food chain, so that we identify where technologies need to be fitted into the processes at the farms, where technologies need to be fitted into the abattoirs processes. For example, they currently use manual processes for incisions and palpation and so on. And if you imagine a poultry abattoir where 5,000 to 6,000 birds are killed in every segment of their operation, it's impossible to see how many abattoir inspectors need to be on ground to actually monitor these processes by hand and do it accurately. So we're looking at technologies that can be applied in the midstream, as well as technologies that can be used for data capture upstream and downstream. By exploring this in a digital twin, we can then see what technologies are viable and what ones, are for the longer term in terms of the cost and applicability. But this kind of endeavor gives us an idea of what is possible in a future food factory as an exploration that is currently ongoing in the network. In terms of where technologies are, the STFC food network, particularly because of the capabilities in the STFC, is a landmine of resources for tapping into advances in new technologies. According to the technology roadmap by Gantar, there are several technologies that are currently being piloted. As you can see, there's an increase in the use of cloud technologies for managing data in these kinds of systems as a shift away from Wi-Fi. And in terms of security, we're starting to see several technologies around signature-less endpoint detection being used for security, for data analytics, and so on. There are also advances in other technology infrastructure areas that I think it will be important for you to pay attention to when you're trying to design or at least conceptualize any research around creating data trust for value through food chain information. So to conclude, optimizing food chain information lies at the heart of creating smart food factories. Food manufacturers must thus consider their digital readiness, the data governance and interoperability strategies that they need to deploy holistically from farm to fork in order to be able to explore the real value that can be created through food chain information. To do this, the future suggests that we would need to look at exploring how data trust models can help us create this new idea of what an organization, a supply chain data organization can look like, so that we can generate value around safety, food fraud prevention, sustainability, and other key measures in food supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. That was fantastic. I could listen to Ray speak all day. It's such a fantastic speaker and a really interesting talk.